Kia ora, everyone. You're okay for us? We get started, everybody?
Yeah, you can hear us all right, Jonathan?
So the purpose of this workshop is to give an update to Council on the development of the Māori engagement framework. And just before we get into it, would just really encourage those elected members that are part of the project advisory group for this work to contribute to the conversation. I think it's important for your colleagues to hear your reflections and observations of the work today. I suppose the key purpose of the presentation is to, while it's about giving an update to Council on the progress made so far, and to talk a little bit about the approach, where we've got to with the framework to date, and some anticipated timeframes for completion. It's also about, I suppose, that sense check with Council that where we're heading feels right, and that we're not going to get to the end of the process and there be this complete allergic reaction that we've actually created something that doesn't align with Council's expectations or principles. So what have we been up to since our last update? So our last update to Council was on the 8th of May earlier this year. At that update, I think actually Councillor Proctor, you requested a bit more information, and so subsequent to that we circulated to councillors a copy of all the PAG minutes, and we also circulated to Council a copy of the sections to date. Since then we've had 4 more PAG hui, so that means that since the beginning of this year we have had 6 formal project advisory group meetings, and it's fair to acknowledge that it has taken us some time to agree on the structure of the document, what will be in each section of the document, and we'll talk a little bit about that in more detail. We worked really hard to essentially get agreement from our partners that rather than us turning up to a meeting and talking about a concept and then going away and writing it, which seemed to be taking us some time because of the demand we were putting on our iwi partners, they were okay with us doing pre-drafting in advance of project advisory group meetings, and what that's allowed for is some really robust and fruitful conversation between iwi partners and elected members around some of the definitions or some of the objectives or some of the approach that we've taken. And I'm sure that particularly those elected members around the table might comment on this, but it's been slow at times, and it's been slow because we've wanted to get it right, and at times we've thought that we've landed an agreement on a section, and then we'll get to another meeting and there'll be different people around the table representing the iwi or different iwi or hapu, and so there has been a few times where we've had to not necessarily start again. You might want to comment on this, Mike, but we've had to go back through a conversation to remind everyone why we got there, where we got there. Where we are today is we have a final draft on sections 1 and 2. Those sections have largely been endorsed by all partners who have been contributing to the conversations in the process. We thought we'd got section 2 across the line a few weeks ago, and there's been a little bit more work done on it, but Te Korahi, Te Tumata Kahoki and Rangatane, who have been participating regularly, are really happy with sections 1 and 2, and Moepoko, who have only managed to make it to one of our project advisory group meetings. We've been working hard to ensure that they've been kept up to date, and there's been no concerns or allergic reactions raised about any of the components of section 1 or 2. I'm going to talk a little bit soon about what is in section 1 and 2, and then what's in section 3, which is kind of the meaty section that we're currently in drafting phase on. But I just, maybe actually before I talk about the framework and how its relationship to partnership agreements, I might just pause there and check whether there's any questions at this point or any observations that anyone wants to make.
I was just going to ask, in terms of MTA not being able to be there, it's only because they can't make it rather than don't want to be there, that's all.
Yeah, it's competing priorities. We've obviously emphasised that we see this as a priority, though.
Yeah, there's actually a few things I want to not raise, but actually comment on as we go along, but I'll save that for a bit later. But I will say that from my point of view, this is underway and has the promise of being a really good document. But, underpinning all good documents is goodwill, and I think that's something that we need to have a conversation about, but a bit later.
Yeah, my question was going to be, how if we have parts of the sections that are at final stage already that we wanted to feedback on, when and how do you want to do that? Because obviously this is going to ultimately land as a condensed document, and you probably don't want to be surprised at the 11th hour with anything there.
So good question, and kind of to the point of one of the purposes of today is that check-in. So what I'd ask of elected members is kind of from a theme or principled perspective, it would be helpful to raise it today. And then, really it's for those elected members who represent council on that project advisory group to raise that in a way which we can hopefully try and navigate a consensus with our partners. If it's particularly cosmetic related things, then flick an email through.
Do you want to profile them now, or do you want to wait until we come to the thing?
Happy for you to profile them now. I do wonder though whether it might be helpful for me to just talk through the approach to the framework. So just one of the key things I wanted to emphasise, and we keep coming back to this conversation at every project advisory group meeting, is that distinction between the framework and so this is my choice of words, no one else's, but maybe I suppose the fear that the Māori engagement framework will replace or remove the partnership agreements that a number of our iwi partners already have in place. The way in which we've started talking about it at the project advisory group, but it was important to check in and sense check with the table today, is that the Māori engagement framework is the I've used the umbrella, but it might be the wrong metaphor, but it's the umbrella document that frames why we do engagement, how we do engagement, when we do it, and ensures that not just as a council but for our iwi partners and our community, they have an understanding of council's approach to this. But what our iwi partners have been really clear about, and again Rogan and Mike might want to speak to this, is the importance of maintaining a bilateral, direct relationship and partnership between council and an iwi grouping or collective of hapu. And we've been pretty upfront, and you'll see when we get to the next slide about what will be contained in Section 3, which includes a template for what new partnership agreements might look like, and that there's a bit of a there's going to be a transition required. We are getting our current partnership agreements onto a new partnership agreement is going to take some work and some time, and yes, there might be some particular bespoke characters to each partnership agreement, but the idea that there's at least a consistent template that everyone knows demonstrates council's commitment to the partnership, but it may have some unique factors depending on that particular iwi grouping. And probably an example is at the moment the post-treaty settlement context versus pre-treaty settlement context, or that depending on where we land on the Māori engagement framework, the hapu relationship versus the iwi relationship. The PAG haven't got to a position of saying we don't need partnership agreements, it will all fit in here. They've said we need the framework, but the framework has to inform the nature of partnership agreements moving forward.
Can I just provide some? Yeah, because that's exactly how I'd always envisaged when we first having this conversation. That the framework sets the strategy, the parameters, the principles, and then there would always be a bilateral agreement. And so that was going to be some of my feedback. Is that I thought that was something that was missing from Section 2, was a signpost to like a hierarchy of documents or a hierarchy of how this all fits together, because I thought Section 2 should, but it sounds like it's going to be in Section 3, which is fine, but signpost to this kind of structure, because the other thing that's missing in Section 2 is the reference to the Māori contribution to decision-making policy and how that interrelates or interconnects. And so it may be that, as I say, later on in the document it covers these things, but Section 2 kind of felt like it was setting the scene and purpose and introducing the document, and so a kind of a signpost to some of those key concepts early was going to be important, because, for example, there's a signpost to a cultural proficiency matrix which is currently in development, and so I want to kind of understand how that fits in with this document. So it might be quite useful to kind of think in those terms of, like, and maybe hierarchy is the wrong word, but kind of show the relationship between these pieces of different documents.
I think that what Sam's referring to is actually covering is in Section 3.1, which are we going to get a copy? Is there a copy of that floating around, or?
I'll just be patient.
Yeah.
We'll try and get a copy. Yeah, still very much in draft format, but yeah, we can.
Maybe it's just a repeat of what Sam said, but differently. I think perhaps umbrella is the right way to frame it. And I always did, at least my expectation was that one didn't cancel out the other. The partnership agreements would still exist. The framework really was just to set the rules of engagement to achieve consistency, because when we look into the detail of those agreements, they're quite, and I understand that there will be still a need to have some of those individual aspects, but overall, a template and trying to achieve more equality across the spectrum would be good. Well, that was my hope in developing this.
So what I might do is just move to the framework structure, and the reason I'm highlighting this is that it is a little bit different to the framework structure that we had presented back in May, and while it includes much of the same content as the Waikato Regional Council model, which Council had kind of highlighted as important, we've really taken the lead from our iwi partners on what sections come first and how things are grouped together. And I'm sure Mike can talk to you about how this was section 1 and now it's section 2 and this was section 3. And like it's taken us time to work through a conversation to, I suppose, ensure that the Māori worldview of how you structure conversations is reflected in this document. So you've got copies of section 1 and 2. Apologies, you only got them today. There was no expectation you will have read them in advance, but appreciate and thank you if you have. Section 1 has largely been prepared. So sorry, I'll reframe that. And just acknowledging Aroha, who can't be here today, she's led the development of this work. And while we've held the pen on section 1 and 2, there has been a number of iterations. Section 1, we were able to rely heavily on our tūhono document, which is an internal toolkit document. And we've worked really hard with both documents to try and condense them. Like at one point in time, they were like 12 pages long because we were trying to be so specific to take away any, I suppose, concern for misinterpretation around words. The intent of section 1, Sam, to your point, is to be able to explain the council policies documents and how it all links, but we will take your feedback on point and we'll just do some reflecting and some work on that to make sure that it signals how things might link together. And we have been really hesitant to include, whether it's this metaphor or a different metaphor, but the language around protection of the Māori engagement framework to guide future partnership agreements, which then will link to resourcing agreements. We can make sure that we're a bit clearer on that. That's helpful guidance. And in section 2, you can read there what's captured there. We're in the drafting phase of section 3. This is the meaty section, and it's slower than we would like. And a part of that is because, I suppose, the lens or the context that people come to the table with is different. Where we've got to is we're essentially working hard to have section 3 fully drafted ahead of the next PAG meeting, which includes the partnership template, so that come our next PAG meeting, hopefully it's a lot more robust conversation about what's wrong with it rather than some of the more ideological commentary about what could be in it.
Malik, can I just test something with you? Because you talked about resourcing agreements.
Yeah.
And so if we go back to that umbrella
Yeah.
diagram, I think in your mind or the organisation's mind, we're envisaging, and I'm presenting this in a hierarchical way, but it doesn't have to be that way, but it's framework, partnership agreement, potentially resourcing agreement. Is that, or are you talking about partnership and resourcing agreement being one and the same document? Because given that section 3 then is about remuneration resourcing, wouldn't we also have then kind of a signpost to the fact that there'd be a resourcing agreement and a resourcing agreement template, so that kind of everyone can see how the whole thing fits together and that you can see that sort of alignment from framework through to end product, for want of a better word.
Yeah, that's kind of where we see it. I think we've got to test some of that with our iwi partners a bit more, but yeah, the remuneration approach and guide is essentially that template you've just spoken to. But we hadn't intended, like how it's been, and this is part of the challenges around the inconsistency, but we have an example of one of our partnerships with one iwi where there's an MOP, so it's the Memorandum of Partnership, and the resourcing agreement is separate to that. And so the partnership agreement is kind of the enduring it's that enduring document versus the resourcing agreement is going to reflect this here. But look, happy to we're happy to hear feedback, and what are your thoughts on that, given we're in drafting stage?
All I would just respond to that and say is that I probably, in my mind, always envisaged the resourcing agreement following the partnership agreement, because the partnership agreement says, well, this is how the framework says we're going to work together, but there's some bespoke, tailored agreement and arrangement captured in the partnership agreement, and the resourcing agreement is probably the agreement that would change over time to respond to peaks and troughs in terms of need and input, because they're obviously, I was always envisioning that there'd probably be a base amount of resourcing support and remuneration, and that's where the framework would get to. But obviously the workload, it does have peaks and troughs, and so the resourcing agreement needs to be able to reflect when there's additional demand being placed on a partner. And so, so like from a line of sight hierarchical position, framework, partnership agreement, resourcing agreement, that kind of alignment.
And I suppose what we've kind of been working on is that the resourcing agreement is to give effect to the partnership around the capacity and capability in order for the iwi to partner, but when there is additional work, an example being the need to procure a cultural impact assessment for a project, the rates anticipated for that are outlined in here, because there's a matrix that says, well, for a project of this size, we'd anticipate this or this or this. Very similar to that Waikato Regional Council framework. But yeah, it would be helpful to sense check that with the table. And Rogan, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Oh, you can. Can I just ask though, really quickly? Since you mentioned CIAs, I'm hoping that this will capture, this work will capture who, and I don't mean as in individuals, but who as in a hapu or iwi group, hapu at place, determines who you get the CIA from, and it might be two groups, or it could be one, depending on the place and space, but rather than and so those that come back in, if it's a random individual that's not necessarily connected or representative of that hapu, then it cannot be accepted, or it has to at least pass by that group and say, is this the right person we need to be receiving this from? Because then we can avoid all those mistakes. That's what I'm hoping this is going to do.
How council gets confidence that when they are getting that work done, that it's done under the mandate of that iwi or that hapu. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's a theme that has come through the conversations. Hi, Jonathan.
Hi. we've got two sort of question comments. The first one is sort of coming back to some of Sam's discussion, is that hopefully there's a bit of flexibility to recognise the variability or uncertainty that exists between iwi going forward in the future, but also between the projects as well. Hopefully the proposed framework here is not so stringent that it's going to cause tension and issues in the future. And the second sort of comment is following up on Pirihira's last question. There has to be scope for iwi or hapu to undertake CIAs directly with the client as well, and not being prescribed by a framework like this. Sometimes there's resource consent issues or other issues where a CIA is produced directly with a client and then goes to council. And I'd hate to see that sort of client sometimes say, well, this is what the council recommends, and so that removes the ability for iwi to scope the work out appropriately and cost it appropriately sometimes. That makes sense?
I'd agree if an applicant has gone direct to an iwi, that's fine, but if they're coming this way around, I guess there can be a conversation had, but there still needs to be some sort of outline in this to kind of at least capture a standard approach. But what you've described, yeah, of course, if they go direct, that's fine by me, and maybe others.
Yeah, I'll come back to your point about the flexibility, Jonathan, but I think that, if we look to the future and imagine the Māori engagement framework having been adopted, what it does is it puts council in a position where, like, if you go onto Auckland City Council's website or Tasman District Council's website, and you are the client or the applicant looking for advice and guidance on who to contact for a cultural impact assessment, like what their details are, what their title is, having confidence that they are the right people, it's all there, versus we don't have that, as has been demonstrated in some historical matters. But the Māori engagement framework will give council the confidence to be able to do, not to be directive, but to be helpful to those applicants or private individuals who are also trying to navigate how they do Māori engagement in the right way. I think to the point about kind of how do we make sure that this isn't so stringent that it catches us out and puts us in a position where we create more tension. I think that's important consideration for us. And what I'd just ask of council is, as you're reviewing section 1 and 2, and particularly when we get to the end of section 3, we'd love for you to test some things, and I think we should test some things as well, as well, if this happened, what would it mean? Or if this scenario happened, what would it mean? And I know that our iwi partners, likewise, they'll also be thinking about that, when something's gone wrong or when something's gone right, if we follow this process, have we got a different result or the same result?
That's good. I mean, the other thing is that flexibility works in our favour as council as well at times. It gives us the ability to have an out or change processes or change our response at times to iwi as well.
So I'll just keep talking, and then I'm sure there's lots more to be said. So kind of in summary, as I've just spoken to, where we're at is, so PAG attendance has been mixed. However, the conversations have been positive, and we have made progress in essentially having sections 1 and 2 in a position where our partners are prepared to endorse. Section 3.1, which is what Mike just spoke to, that has been prepared and presented to the PAG for review. So we've broken section 3 into 3 areas. and sections 3.2 and sections 3.3 are in draft. Happy to circulate 3.1, and likewise, as soon as sections 3.2 and 3.3 are draft, happy to circulate that to councillors as well. We're acutely aware that our job is to work with our iwi partners to develop this together, but we know that ultimately it is council who will need to adopt the framework or not, and so we're not wanting to create something that when we bring a final product that council are going to throw away, because that would not help our partnership, and it would undermine all the effort and energy that has gone into this really important work to date. So if there are allergic reactions, if you're feeling uneasy about something, the sooner we know that, the sooner we can be more upfront with our iwi partners about direction of travel for council. So moving forward, we're continuing our monthly PAG hui in the background. Between Aroha, Brent and myself, we're preparing documentation so that it's ready for the hui. We are also continuing to, engage with Waikato Regional Council, but also a couple of other councils who are progressing this work at the same time as us. Most recently, Dunedin City Council have just adopted a framework which is, it's all useful because it helps us check that we're not just doing a job, but hopefully we're doing a good job. We're working hard to maintain communication with all our iwi partners, and we'll continue to refine the content based on the feedback of the PAG, but also feedback of council. I am really mindful that this, which I think everyone is kind of nodding heads at and saying, yeah, we understand and agree that it sits as the umbrella, but that partnership agreements will still exist, is that I think it does need to be acknowledged that there is some tension around the fact that we do have one collective of hapu, which represents an iwi group that we don't have a partnership agreement with, and we've been hesitant to progress that partnership agreement in the absence of this work. And alongside that, we've also got other groups who we do have a partnership agreement with, who, given how things move on or things that have happened, they're eager to review their partnership agreement. And so just I'm not highlighting that to put any pressure on council. I think it's an important acknowledgement that we are going to need to think about the impacts of that and how we navigate the framework, but also the partnership agreements. My conversations to date, as recent as yesterday with one iwi, was the opportunity for them is to really lean into the drafting of section 3.3, which is where we'll have the template partnership agreement, because if they invest the energy into that, then that helps us think about how we could put, progress meaningful conversations with iwi around partnership agreements.
Yeah, so because one of the challenges here is going to be matching, this is a challenge for council, is to make sure that we match the principles and the framework with available budget, right? And ultimately, in terms of, because I think in terms of that remuneration and resourcing section of this framework, it should be really principle based, and we should look at what we're trying to achieve, but we've also got to be realistic about the availability of funding. And so, I'm not saying that the available budget right now should drive what is the content of that, but somehow we've kind of got to, and so that's for you guys, for the team to figure out how we do that, because that section could create a whole lot of unrealistic or unresourced or unfunded commitments, and so we need to somehow have that early conversation around what is the level of commitment and what are we anticipating in terms of that space, because that might make it easier to reflect the principles in that section. Am I making myself clear?
Look, I think there comes a time where we've drafted section 3, all of it, and a little bit to Jonathan's point about the flexibility piece is we've got to sit down and ask ourselves the question, and our iwi partners will want to know this as well, is, well, what does this mean? And so while we've not started this work on the basis of resourcing, there is a pragmatic resourcing conversation required at a point in time. Justin is listening, but he's not well, so he's just sent me an email just with his comments. I'll just read it out. Ngā mihi o, apologies but keeping flu to myself. Wanted to say huge thanks to our iwi hapu partners, Rogan, Mike, Nina, Monique, Aroha, and especially Brent holding the fort at our most recent PAG hui. It's been very well articulated today, and I'm grateful for the feedback fellow EMs have shared today, and those points will be captured going forward. This is no easy task, but as I've heard from the workshop today, there's a real positive to this process and outcomes to celebrate and enhance our iwi hapu participation alongside council outcomes and requirements. Total ko ngā kōrero about CIAs and the various scenarios. Thanks everyone, and look forward to sharing this with our community for transparency. We don't need to wait for treaty settlements to do the right stuff, is my personal opinion, and we all need clarity of who, where, when, and what we're engaging partners on. Thanks. If you're able to share, Monique. So acknowledging that, yes, this was about giving you an update, but it was also a sense check. How are we feeling? What are you worried about? What do you need us as officers to take away as we further progress our work over the coming couple of months? Are we feeling okay with the direction of travel?
Just feedback from me. I think it's a great bit of work. I quite like the idea of the umbrella. Like for me, as an outcome of this, I'd quite like just more transparency, so there's not those sort of people or certain groups feeling that they're getting, not getting treated fairly. So, and I think this is what this document will achieve under that sort of that wider umbrella. And then obviously when we get into section 3 and 4, I guess it'll just nut things out a little bit more with detail. So I'm more than comfortable, and I think it's a great bit of work, and well done to everybody involved.
Jonathan?
Yeah, just to reiterate, Paul's comments, I think it's great work. It's made good progress. Hurry up and finish it. I think we just need to get it done as well. And I think it's going to contribute to some of the value that iwi and iwi organisations bring to our community. At a recent, I don't know if I should say this in this meeting, at a recent MTA board meeting, it was highlighted that, MTA, like other iwi organisations across our region, employs about 60 to 70 people and, brings in millions of dollars of contracts and income into our economy as well that is spent in our region. And so anything we can do to support capacity and support these iwi organisations to continue is really good. So yeah, let's just hurry up and get it finished.
Aroha mai. Just wanting to acknowledge those that have sat around the table. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to get to the hui, but appreciation for our council members that have been attending and the valuable input that you've put forward so far. So really wanting to thank you guys for your mahi, as well as Monique and Brent. For me, it's not only clarity for our community, but maybe for our iwi partners as well, having this process. So hope it continues, and I know that there will be an end and something will be in place and it will be better for our whole community.
Kia ora.
Yes, look, I think the bit that stands out for me is section 3 and what that looks like. And I think Monique did make the point earlier about testing, scenarios where we can test the toolkit approach. And that's when it would become alive to me, is when there are scenarios which enable us to check whether the toolkit has the sort of responses that are really good, robust responses. So that's when it will feel real, I guess. And I'm assuming there will be scenarios, there'll be some made up situations to sort of say, in this situation, does the toolbox respond well and adequately? I guess, that's my only thing, is that's when it will become real. But the framework itself, and very helpful, Sam, your sort of hierarchy approach for me to sort of understand it. So very comfortable.
I'm just, the other thing I'm hoping for is, and this is, I guess, from the community's perspective, the evidence of what is resource. Like, at least for the CIA, you can hold up a report and show the work that's been developed, but other things, the things that the hapu and iwi will contribute to, like how you're able to either articulate that or show it in a project, is really important, I think. And just so when you're doing the detail in section 3, just sort of think about, well, what does that actually look like? What does it produce? Therefore, there's no question about resourcing it. I guess it comes back to accountability.
Yeah, really comfortable with the direction of travel. Two things quite just like signpost to is keen to understand either now or at a later point what the purpose and scope of the cultural proficiency matrix is. And secondly, I see section 4 talks about implementation and evaluation. I was probably envisaging something that's got a number of different phases to it, and so like probably more around monitoring, evaluation, reporting, learning. So those kind of different stages, because it's going to be, this document's going to continue to guide those other partnership agreements, and so we should set again the framework for how we're going to monitor the success and implementation, and how we're going to take away the learnings or improvements that we see. And so can you speak to the cultural proficiency matrix now, and just what that looks like, and what the intent is? Is that an internal document for council? Is it what's its purpose and scope?
I think the purpose of it is to demonstrate how we are going to ensure that we've got the skills and capability for the organisation to breathe life to this. But in terms of any more thought beyond that, it's in section 4, we've not given much thought to section 4 yet. There's like the Waikato Regional Council had it's quite light touch, but if you've got any ideas or thoughts, we're happy to hear that to help guide our work, acknowledging it's probably going to be a good month before we get to section 4.
And the only reason I've raised it at this point is because section 2 obviously signposts to this as a sort of a key, I don't want to say pillar, but a key outcome of the framework. And so, it would be quite useful, I think, to understand. I mean, what you've outlined is helpful. That's fine. I think wait and see.
Just a quick question: Is there a has the conversation been had, or is there a mutual understanding around resourcing, whereby this certain part is in an effort to help with capacity? So if there is something to be done, that people are coming together to do that, because essentially, the resourcing is there to enable it, or it's still like, oh, we don't have the capacity, or how do we get on in that aspect?
I don't know if I'm going to answer this well, but my sense is that what the Māori engagement framework will do is build confidence that our iwi partners know that we're going to be talking to them about the stuff that really matters to them. And with that confidence comes some opportunity for their capacity to be harnessed on the stuff that really matters, rather than them feeling like they've got to be called into everything, or we feel like we've got to call them into everything. So, which in turn I think does help with that, that overload. But I think that's probably something we've got to continue to test through this process.
I've got quite a few thoughts on this. I'll see if I can cobble some of them together and create a coherent dialogue. The first thing that kind of occurs to me about this is this. So potentially, it's from my point of view, this is quite a difficult thing to achieve, and we face, and these are I'm not looking to raise things from a point of view of sort of the doomsayer, but I think there are issues that we need to actually not shrink from and actually acknowledge and be prepared to sort of think deeply about them. I see my kind of role here as anything to do with the council is basically I'm here as a guardian of the public purse and a guardian of the democratic principles that come along with that. And, my own views, beliefs, possible ideology are secondary and shouldn't be considered within that. So just setting that aside, I think we have a duty here to make sure we spend that money wisely, every last cent of it. Section 3 is where we get into the actual money part of it. But before we go there, we're kind of talking about the meaning of words. We have a partnership agreement here where we have yet to actually come up with a common agreement on what partnership means. So everything is kind of underpinned by that. If we don't set out this document in a simple form with the terminology we're using in it and give a simple definition of what these words mean, then the document and the agreement become completely interpretable by anyone for anything. In the same way, actually, I'm not raising this for any political point, but look how contentious the interpretation of the Treaty of Waitangi is to anyone. An example, in the last hui was talking with Danielle about what sovereignty means, and I told her what it meant to me as far as the treaty goes. Her definition of it is basically it establishes Maori as a sovereign people, and in play that would mean a separate state. Now, I'm not. She is as right as I am in my view, or wrong, or whatever. There's no right answer to it. But all of these things have different meanings to different people. It's empirical that we get this right. Otherwise, we are actually just wasting our time, and we're actually possibly making something worse. So the meaning of words is very important. Principles of democracy, well, that comes into section 3, where there's two things in section 1 and 2. I don't think there's any issues there really at all. I think they're well done. Section 3, there are some contentious parts of that, in my view, and that's all it is, but you guys have to make your own decisions about that. They go to potentially unelected representation and ultimately co-governance, that could actually be acted out within this framework. And those are two things that haven't even been debated nationally in terms of what they may mean in future. So we need to, I think, have a good long hard think about incorporating that in an agreement. Goodwill. Well, I think this will be a good document in the finish. I'd like to see it in as fewer pages as possible for everyone's benefit, and that means keep it simple. But ultimately, it's going to be underpinned by goodwill. So we can't legislate that. We can't agree that on a piece of paper. So it just requires us all of the time to operate from that, but not just us, our partners in this agreement. Just going back to the money side of it, I think we're talking about in section 3, scheduling what we're actually paying for, like being really specific about this is a service or something that, and this is what we will pay for it. Once we've done that, and that's a common thing of the things that we do with iwi that we pay for, then we can have a think about the things that aren't specified in that schedule. And in terms of being accountable to the public, I think we need to be able to say to them, the rest of this money that we spent this year for this means that. And that's the transparency part that I think ultimately we're going to have to put in front of the community. So this agreement is not without its challenges, and I think there's some reasonable ones in there. But yeah, I'm thoroughly happy to be part of it. I think that's pretty much all.
Thanks, Mike. And yeah, your voice around the table is helpful perspective because it, particularly that community transparency piece, which we know is so important and has kind of been one of the catalysts for why audit first of all said that this work was important. Any other commentary? Otherwise, we'll keep you updated. Thank you for your feedback and input today. I think that's been really useful to help us not just check on 1 and 2, but also in the drafting of 3. And what we'll do is kind of make sure that there's another check-in point where we're at the point of end of section 3 to check that we're all aligned again.
I guess the one thing I'd like to echo that Mike raised is around the definitions. I think words and their meanings are important, and just so that everyone's on the same page about how they understand what these things mean.
Okay, thank you. We will move on to our next workshop around stormwater.
Good afternoon, Council. Thank you, sir. We are here to discuss the enormous amount of stormwater improvements, the amount of flooding we've prevented over the last 2 years, have a bit of a go through on our planned works moving forwards, and a couple of other bits and pieces which we're hoping you'll find interesting. I'm joined by my colleague Brent Tucker. Brent's responsible for pretty much no flooding over the last 2 years. That and maybe the rain not being as frequent. So I'll hand it over to Tux, or Brent Tucker, and he can take it from there.
Thanks, James. James obviously already touched on what we'll talk about, and you may have had a chance to look through the presentation. So we'll get started. So pretty much the purpose of the stormwater improvements, in a nutshell, is to mitigate the stormwater runoff in urban and rural areas, which a lot of it affects properties, road access, footpaths, etc. So the works that we've completed and the work that we plan to do in the future is obviously to carry on mitigating those issues. So some of the improvements that we've already completed, a lot of you will already be across a lot of these, but Ramona Ave and Forest Road in Waterbury Beach, we had major issues out there in 2022-23, where access to properties on Ramona Ave was limited unless you had a four-wheel drive vehicle. Forest Road, not a lot of drainage. This one here was an interesting one. There was signs of an existing open drain within the properties, which had obviously been filled in over time. I'm not sure when. So we ended up constructing another drain within the road reserve and taking that water down to King's Canal. We had to do a lot of work on both sides of the road, so the main drain's on the southern side, but we also had to link in from the northern side by the chamber and road culvert to collect the water from the northern side as properties were being flooded out of there. So yeah, that just travels down to King's Canal. Thankfully, no further issues there as of yet. Got a question? Yes. Oh, yes, sorry.
Street, Union Street becomes the Shannon to Foxton Road, like, if you keep going, which obviously becomes a rural area. And how much of those drains, I know the roads are obviously ours, and stormwater usually has become part of that, but since it's rural, is there some responsibility required of Horizons to maintain those big drains, or is it still us? And
Thanks, Councillor Tukapuga. That's a really good point. So we're connected into the Foxton East Drainage Scheme, which is a Horizons Drainage Scheme. Prior to this work, and I think the next slide are both projects that connected into it, and we talked to the drainage scheme engineers prior. We look at this as road drainage improvements if it's protecting the roading asset, if the roading asset is at risk of flood or is being damaged by being constantly inundated. It's good asset management to get that water away somewhere. Horizons don't tend to undertake a lot of maintenance work or take a lot of responsibility for drains that aren't part of their schemes, whether it's urban or rural.
okay, I was just trying to understand if there's points in the network sort of upstream of a drain or off to the side that's impacting, and without addressing that, it just keeps on flowing hard through, like parts like this. What? Yes, no, sometimes. Or is it just pockets, maybe? Because, I mean, there's one up Paranui Road we had.
Yeah, we know the one you're talking about on Paranui Road. There's a couple of spots where we've had flooding over the road there, and it tends to stick around. That specific one's quite tricky. We did deal with one spot on the eastern end of the road where we managed to get the water away from the road and had some land drainage and benefits as well. But yeah, in terms of a drainage scheme, basically we talk to Horizons to make sure it's got capacity. We're not going to make anything on their assets worse, and they're generally pretty accommodating on letting us dispose to it in that case. Whether they would consider extending the coverage of their maintenance routines, it's not something we've had much luck with in the past to get them to look at these little pockets outside the scheme. But if we can do stuff that's going to help the road and it's also going to help the surrounding properties, we think it's quite good investment.
Sorry, next one ties in with Union Street. We had issues around the intersection of Hickford Road where the road was covered in water. It just wasn't getting away. So we installed a chamber on the eastern side, a road culvert under the intersection, and then we guided it down Foxton Shannon Road for 400 metres, I believe it was, where we had permission from a property owner and Horizons to cut through the paddock and connect it into Andrews Drain, which is a Horizon scheme drain. So that's eliminated the issue at the intersection of Hickford. Thomas Place, Foxton Beach. This was one where road runoff was entering properties on a small section. There is existing curb and channel on parts of the road, but this bit here where we installed the curb and channel, there was nothing, so it was just running off. So yeah, that was just a basic new curb and channel install, but linking it into the existing curb and channel and stormwater network. Good question.
Sorry, was there a question?
So yeah, sorry to interrupt the flow. Just in terms of testing the results of the drainage work, I know that severe rain dump that occurred, which exposed the shortcomings in the Hickford and Shannon Road intersection. We've got comment that there has not yet been sufficient dump to really test it, or there has been. In other words, I guess I'm asking about the level of confidence in terms of the works done.
Yeah, so when it was flooding in 2022, it was a bit of a combination of a high water table as well as heavy rainfall, and we haven't really had similar conditions. We've had some good rain, but when the water table's low and that sandy soil, most of it will disappear into the soil regardless. We won't really know if it's going to solve every single event. I'm confident that it would solve the majority of events. I probably wouldn't say it'll cover a 1 in 20 year event or a 1 in 10 year event, but it is more resilient. It's a big improvement.
So yeah, Park Ave and Windsor Street, Waitawere Beach. This was a historic one around the intersection. As you can see from the middle photo, probably not best under the light, but this is all water around the intersection, and that water is actually going over top of the footpath and into properties. So what we did here, we installed a length of curb and channel, new curb and channel. There was no curb and channel there originally. We put in a catch pit here, which linked over to a new chamber. You can see all this new curb and channel around each corner. So we had sump either side, and then we've got a gravity-fed stormwater line connecting into the existing network on Roa Ave. And we've had no issue. So this was a recurring event. So this wouldn't even happen under heavy rainfall. It would be light rainfall, and you'd end up with this type of scenario. And there's no water been there since the works took place. So. Hart Street, Foxton Beach. So this one's a bit of a tough one. It's quite a flat road. There weren't too many options. We looked at curb and channel, but with the height of the road and the heights of the properties, if we had have done curb and channel, we may have still left issues for the property owners with water congregating in the properties behind the curb. So we went for a swale drain, very shallow at the top end where the turnbowl is, and slowly getting deeper as we come down. We've got a chamber that runs into, and then it's piped. We've put a new piece of curb, which I don't have a photo of, around the corner, and that is piped to a bubble up sump, and then that runs down the existing curb and channel into the stormwater network. We're yet to see whether we have any issues on the southern side of the road. We just want to see how this work on the northern side goes first, make sure that we've solved that issue, and then we can look in if there's still further issues on the southern side of the road. Short Street, Foxton Beach. So this one here, this caused issues on properties on the southern side of the eastern end of Short Street, but also on properties on Hartley Street at the bottom, as Short Street sits higher. There was an issue with runoff running through the properties on the southern side of Short to the properties on Hartley. This one we were looking at possibly putting in a pipe network and getting it down Dawson Street and out to the stormwater outlet. But we just thought we'd give soak pits a try, so we did a whole heap of test holes. Because it is a higher point of Foxton Beach, that's the eastern end of Short Street. And at this point, the residents seem to think that this has helped significantly. So 2 large soak pits, one on the northern side, one on the southern side, and the properties that were previously affected, even a minor rainfall, have said that so far this is doing the job. So hopefully, we can avoid putting in a pipe network. Nash Parade, Foxton Beach, very similar to Thomas Place. No curb and channel originally. Not a major issue such as water affecting dwellings, but a big enough issue where property access was affected for vehicles, etc. And with limited parking in the street anyhow, vehicle access was quite important to property owners. So a stretch of new curb and channel from south to north, and the curb and channel links into the existing sump and curb and channel on the corner of Seabury Ave. Park Ave, Waitawiri, so this is north of Windsor Street and Rummel Street. So the issue with this one was, once again, we were relying on a soak pit either side of the road. Soak pits weren't coping. You can see this picture here. Even a minor rainfall, the road will fill up, so the road slopes from the north, from Waterbury Beach Road, and also the south from Rummel Street. So it's like a bubble type issue. Water builds up, flows over the footpath into properties, and then on the western side, no curb and channel, just boom. You've got some low properties where water was just running over down into garages, etc. Caused a number of road closures because it got that deep, and then the issue with cars, even if it was minimal depth, vehicles driving through, pushing water into the properties. So here we make the soak pit on this side redundant, on both sides redundant. We put in a road crossing culvert to a new chamber, and we put a gravity-fed stormwater line and down to the existing stormwater at the intersection of Rummel Street. And no more water. Bishops Road, Ohau is another one. The property here, Chris got plenty of CRMs over the years. Water under his house, causing major issues. So for this one, we installed soak pits throughout. So this one, the water comes, this is one that where Pity sort of touched on, where water comes from higher up. There's drainage through private property that ends up coming into a roadside drain on the Noah East Road, and then it comes through down Bishops Road. There is a culvert pipe under the railway tracks which goes into Council Reserve, and there's a large soak pit. That soak pit sometimes didn't cope, the water had nowhere else to go, it would come, as it does, follow this line down to the intersection. There was no way to get past the intersection. It would topple over the road and mainly affect Chris Good. Minor effects on the vineyard property. So what we ended up doing, we did some extra soak pits just as collection points to mitigate the amount of water coming to this point. And then to deal with the water at this point, we installed a chamber here, piped across, and the water running its natural course down through, past all the properties. Does anyone have any questions on that stuff that we've done?
No, just fantastic. It's good to actually see those works, and also in terms of Foxton Beach in particular, to realise those were some real pinch points in terms of local residents' complaints. So it's terrific to see the response. Thank you.
Yeah, I echo those words. I think this is some of the best work Council's done in the last couple of years, to be honest, to fix some issues that have been long-standing and full of, many of the complaints and concerns that we've had from residents to fix these. I know I've had nothing but, fulsome praise for the work that's done. So just echo that. Thank you.
Tucker, just question about, so that's great to go through all those ones there, and so other than Waisiri Rise, are there still any of the original properties that are on the hotspot map that we're still working through in terms of a solution? Or
Those were the major ones where we were getting consistent complaints about. There are further ones in the planning, which we'll come to. And then at the end we will show some maps of the potential areas that we've identified, which are minor effects type stuff. For that. So, yes, so the improvements in planning at the moment. Oxford Street, mobile live-in. I'm sure everyone will be aware of the issues here, which affects mobile and Ross McCull cars. As you can see here, the water issues that encroach in the forecourt and affect the footpath and road. So this work's already begun. We thought we'd tie it in with the stormwater, the upgrade of York Street, Oxford Street across time. Wastewater, sorry. So we've put in 2 sumps so far, which are connected into the existing stormwater line. So one outside mobile and one outside the dry cleaners. And we've got further works to do there. We are planning on a third sump by Ross McCull, but also to mitigate these issues, we're doing some work with the 2 sumps at the intersection of Torrens Street to get those into the stormwater network. So we won't see the same volume of water coming down that section of road causing these issues. Bergen Road, I might let James discuss this one a bit further.
Thanks, Brent. So all through these, you might notice the pictures on the left with the red dots. Those dots are call-outs that our contractor attended over the last couple of years. So Bergen Road is a residential development north-west of the racecourse in Foxton. If you're not aware of it, it's serviced solely by soak pits and it doesn't have an overland flow path. If it floods, the water just stays there. In the same sort of time frame of August through to August 2022 through to January or February 23 is the other issues we had. The high groundwater table that the whole development had flooding. It would sort of reduce to isolated flooding, like you can see on the picture there on the right. It's quite a tricky one. There's quite a few options that we are investigating for this, but a potential opportunity is for us to look at funding a larger project through the what was known as the Foxton East Drainage Scheme Feds Improvement Project, or the Te Awaho Foxton Climate Resilience Project, which Council's been collaborating with Horizons on. There's an opportunity for basically some unaccounted for funding through that project, which we are working with Horizons to look at the feasibility of a couple of projects that we could look at delivering, and Council could take the lead delivery role on funding that we don't have to find ourselves, which would be, in my opinion, quite a good outcome. So here there's a few options. We could look at a full stormwater line to connect into a stormwater network that eventually gets to the Foxton River Loop it connects in through from Ladies Mile. It goes through some side streets. That might be problematic because that network's quite under capacity as it is. So there's a few stages that we could look at, but ultimately this is it's a project that we don't have an easy solution for, but we're investigating options and we might be able to deliver it at minimal or no council expenditure.
Can I just ask a question, James? Like, because I think there's like a pond or something in the middle of the racecourse at the moment, is there? And so, is there potential scope to have a discussion with the owners of the racecourse around what capacity they currently have, what their needs are, and long-term plans, so that we could potentially do joint solutions? Or
Yes. So, although we're here taking all the glory, we do collaborate closely with our colleague Barry Wallington in the Three Waters team, and he's been doing exactly what you're suggesting. It's another option that's being looked at. I believe my boss wants to have a word.
Earlier comments, I think, just rounding out that 18 months ago we had lots of issues, which looked like lots of problems, not as significant as what our colleagues have faced over in Hawke's Bay, but not a lot of money. So we've taken an intentional approach to really focus on some of those small issues that can be addressed complementary to the roading works program. There's an old saying around building a road that there's three key ingredients, which is drainage. So when we look at improvements in curb and channel or drainage works, it's actually important to fix the road, and if it complementary investment, we can actually make a difference for a private property. That has been very much the intentional approach, whilst we look at some of the bigger ticket items like the feds or some of the flooding in North East Levin or the likes of Okarito. So it's it has been quite an intentional approach, reasonably high level of confidence that we will have made a big improvement when we do finally get the rains returning. And it's the approach is really being focused around the road reserve rather than trying to address some of the policy issues around catchments, acknowledging that the majority of these catchments in Levin, Waitarere or Foxton do have elements of rural runoff as well, but effectively if it runs downhill, we're receiving it. It's a matter of how we can address it within our means.
Right. So the next one that we're looking at is Waitarere Beach Road. So this is just west of Waitarere Rise roundabout. This is only minor really. The water comes right out to the centre line at times. Property's not affected as such, but it's more the issue that it's on the corner, a lane closed, vehicles travelling around. So this here relies, there is a catch pit in here which is piped across to a soak pit. The soak pit doesn't go and then it just fills up. Now that we've done the upgrades on Ramona and Forest Road, and we've upgraded the pump station on Waitarere Beach Road, we're looking at the option of possibly a gravity-fed pipe through to the new pump chamber. But there's further investigation needed there. There's other services to think about within the road corridor, so we're just working around that. Cambridge Street South, Levin, many of you will be aware of this one as well. Current issues with water ponding within the road. So we're looking at upgrading existing soak pits, but also installing further soak pits across with extra curb and channel renewal as well to try and address some of those issues. Did you want to discuss further things possibly down here? Yeah.
I'll just touch on some other issues local in this area. So there's a quite small, I think, 300 ml pipe that goes under the rail that collects some water that is from Tararua Road. So forward planning, thinking about the future of Tararua Road and the surrounding area and how the stormwater is dealt with there. It's going to be a priority mainly in the planning stage at the moment to consider how we look at the capacity of the drainage in that whole area. There's certainly not enough to connect much of Tararua Road or the surrounding area to a reticulated network there. And that pipe eventually gets to a historic semi-filled in private land drain that wiggles around before connecting into, I think, the Arafota drain. And we really need to work out some options on how to approach that in the future, and probably in the not long-term future or the next couple of years, we need to have a solid plan in place to enable development and upgrade works we need with O2NL coming along. So this work here, it's important. It's an existing problem, but we don't want to overinvest here. So we're taking a softly approach, redoing soak pits that have probably been silted up and aren't functioning that well, and upgrade them a bit to keep it functional. But we're not looking for the gold standard here, while we're planning something more longer term that's going to be fit for purpose for the future.
Sorry, James, does that include the turn off from Cambridge into the state highway? Because, that's a continual. You only fixed that, only got fixed a couple of years ago, and it seems to be already undermined and big great holes and things like that already. It almost feels like it needs some major work rather than just patch up work, and I don't know, is it worth it doing it?
So there's some contractual matters with that project, and there's a public meeting or public briefing. I'm not certain if I can cover it in detail, but basically we're aware of the defects and we're going through a process with the contractor to address those.
All right. So, we touched on it before. I'll just get out of the presentation. So we've mapped some potential flooding areas.
I'll talk about that while you get it up.
Yeah. Did we want to go through? Does anyone have any other questions or anything before we move on?
I'll just describe what we're going to be looking at in a second. So we've undertaken a process across a few groups and council to basically make a big register of all the flooding issues we know about and review past CRMs to make sure we're covering as many as we can. So we're working on getting this added into a layer in our GIS, which is almost there, but we've also got it in our asset management software, which Brent's just wrestling with at the moment, so we can go straight into it. Our asset management software is called RAM, so it can have a GIS sort of map, like it's overlaid a Google map. And the asset management software is really good. We use it to do our asset valuations. All of our assets are in there with maintenance records and everything, and we also tell our contractors what to do on it. So we can put something called a dispatch in, which is basically a job, and we say, you need to go do this then, and then they charge through that dispatch. Anyway, having this information in our asset management software is really good for us for forward works planning, and we can really actively track not only the progress of these improvements dealing with these problem areas, but also the costs that the problem areas are causing, because we could directly check them up against the sort of reactive maintenance that we're doing. So it's quite good. So we're using this sort of side of it for the Ford Works planning, but we also want to make sure that the information is available to everyone here at council who might have something to do with stormwater, good record keeping, and being able to really make sure that none of this good information we're getting during these events has been lost. So yeah, these are all the spots. June, would you like to zoom in on maybe Foxton Beach for us? Is always a good one. Yeah. Yeah, so these are all identified flooding issues, and each one we can sort of click on and get some information on. There's still some data that we put together that we haven't got into each one, which gives a more detailed description of the issues, but we're working on that moving forwards. And it's a live database that we'll always be able to add stuff into, and yeah. Is there any area anyone wants to have a look at, or any questions on this? Is there anything you want to think of? Is there any issues that you can think of and you want to test us and see if we've caught it?
Zoom in decent way. So that whole area is covered. Because we've got with all the historic issues with the open drain at the back, these areas have been a bit iffy.
Yeah.
So are you saying that you're planning for that?
Yeah, you probably note that the resale of MacArthur Street is at least 5 years overdue, and the reason it's been held off is we're looking at a water and wastewater upgrade. So that's that connection from the wastewater treatment plant up to northeast Levin. So there's quite a lot of work with the wastewater. We were looking to optimise the layout of designs for growth, so it might mean new networks being built to directional drill through the rise on MacArthur Street to reorientate a lot of the wastewater that goes down Kennedy Drive and then gets pumped twice before it gets into the system. So there's an optimisation process looking at the water and wastewater, but in conjunction with that, we're also looking at the feasibility of some stormwater upgrades, and that's almost testing our consent around the Coley Pond project, which currently collects a considerable amount of water from the Market Garden area to the east of our town, and that is causing a lot of our issues within our network. And so we're looking at the option, which will be quite a simple process, to redirect the flows from Eastern Way into that catchment. But there's obviously a consenting and engagement process before we would go down that path. So it's very early days. We haven't got those concepts together. We'd need to undertake engagement with EU partners and with Horizons around any modifications to that consent. But short of that, it'll be a fallback to say what can we do in terms of upgrading the size of the pipes in the existing network. So yeah, there's some work in progress there.
And just to add to that, Barry, who's our collaborative colleague who's absent at the moment, he had done some investigation on the land drain in the Market Gardens and found a few blockages and other issues which he's got resolved, which potentially might have resolved the worst of that, but we can't really say for sure at this stage. I'd still say there's a risk with that area currently. So that is the sort of southeast live in. So a lot of that area in red there. Actually, we've gone a little bit far. There's a basically they're not connected, or not a lot of that is connected to a reticulated network that actually goes to an outlet. A lot of that is a catch pit that goes to a soak pit, and like works 99% of the time, but 1% of the time when groundwater's up, with really heavy rain, can have extended flooding. So it's sort of in this would be an expensive long-term project to fix. It's a full reticulated network, probably consent implications as well. But it's not a acute issue that we're really scared of. The houses are all a little bit higher than the road. We're not aware of any dwellings being flooded in the area. But it's not great for the road, it's not great for the infrastructure. So we want to make sure we don't forget about it.
Because we have reduced the budget in stormwater considerably for the next 20 years, basically, haven't we? I just, if that's going to, So you're saying the next long-term plan might be a bit different?
Well, I wouldn't want to presuppose, but having like a good database and having just stuff in our back pocket is always handy for, as I like to call them, central government lolly scrambles. You never know what sort of funding opportunities can come up, and the better prepared we are to jump on them. And this sort of work is going to be quite helpful for that.
Just following up on that, could it possibly be, in terms of budgets, we have reactive budgets, so if something unforeseen happens, there's some money there to go and fix the problem, and in some ways this work is like we're anticipating, because it's a problem in the past, so we are just getting ahead of the weather event and plugging the problem. Can it therefore be allocated out of reactive, or no?
The projects we've talked about, we deliver them under the roading improvements broad category. So everything we're doing has at least an aspect of improving that or protecting the roading assets. There really, in my experience, there aren't a great deal of stormwater issues that don't have a component where we can't say this benefits the road, we can justify expenditure for the roading. So that there is budget in the LTP for it. Our roading reactive stuff is probably more constrained than that side of it, to be honest. And I suppose that's the best I can do to answer your question.
I guess just your question, if I can frame it in a different way, would be where is the reactive stormwater budget line? Where is that being directed at the moment? It's not this type of project. Is it other types of non-road stormwater issues?
The state of our stormwater network is in really good condition in terms of asset. So there's not a lot of renewals budget in our long-term plan, unlike the water and wastewater. In terms of reactive stormwater budget, there just simply isn't a lot of funding allocated that's into reactive stormwater or in the overall capital stormwater investment within the LTP. There's been some shuffling of budgets, for that focus on the Lake Horowhenua stormwater and investment there. So probably what the message is, we're doing what we can with the budget within the roading works. There's very limited scope, but the importance of the work that's being done around consolidating all of those CRMs, all of the collective knowledge all of the investigation work, is that will then throw up a package in the future that we could start to look at, prioritising that investment on a almost a business case, or there's some value in investing here because it delivers on this result. Here's the estimate. Will be very much helped when we get a dedicated stormwater engineer on board, who will take over a lot of that wider consenting framework and join the dots on some of the work the team have been doing. So we are very close. We're in the market for a stormwater engineer. It's been a number of years since we had a dedicated stormwater resource, so that should help drive some efficiency and some focus for a conversation with elected members in the future around budget allocations. But yeah, short answer is there's not a lot of funding, reactive or capital investment.
But what I'm hearing is a specific question about what are the sorts of projects we would spend reactive money on, and I think that we'll note that and we'll come back to you with a more direct answer.
Yeah, just on that too, team. I think we've shown the last couple of years, guys, that where there are those localised issues that sort of all of a sudden get worse, you've shown that there can be mitigation measures taken that don't actually cost a hell of a lot of money. And you think that you might have shown already, Hickford Union Street, a really good example of just good basic mitigation measures. Swales and drain through a property agreement can make a hell of a difference, and water area, forest road to develop. So it doesn't always have to cost an absolute fortune to deal with some of these localised issues. It's just a bit of pragmatism and a bit of common sense and a bit of good old basic work.
I think a little bit of context there. Thanks for those comments and those questions. Just around the reactive conversation, the maintenance conversation. So we do split the assets of stormwater between the stormwater activity and the roading activity. So the catch pit and the lead, or a few metres of the lead, are a roading asset, and they are maintained with the roading budgets, the road drainage maintenance or road drainage renewals, as well as the curb and channel, as well as most of the roadside drains in rural areas. So that's all a roading asset. It's moving stormwater, but the primary reason we're moving the stormwater is to keep it off the road. The stormwater asset starts once the lead connects into a chamber in the main, so those are stormwater assets. And generally, if we're doing a good job of the roading assets, there isn't need for a lot of maintenance or renewals on the mains. If we are keeping our stuff clean, if we are making sure that the bottles aren't getting in or getting cleaned out before they get to there, so there might not be a lot of maintenance or renewal budgets in the stormwater, but it's kind of because there's a bit more in the roading stuff.
And I think also just with having this mapped out as it is, the roading contractor can also see all of this. So prior to heavy rainfall events, they know that these are potential areas where sumps and things need cleaning. So they can prioritise their work with this as well. And for reporting purposes, we can also see, because all their jobs are done electronically through RAM, so we can see all their dispatches and say, oh, they've been to Solway Street 5 times. And we can actually report on how many sumps they've cleaned in these high priority areas and that type of thing.
Gosh, just south of there, James, look right out State 1, there's a big red blurb around Waikawa, in Manukau, I think. Is that it? Yeah. Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so the size of the bubble doesn't mean that's a bigger problem. So this isn't necessarily a big concern. There's basically a network of private land drains that interacts with the roading network, and it has caused issues in the past. We don't actually know exactly where, or it's quite hard to map it out, So when I was talking to the GIS team about getting this, I just said, "I'll just put a big bubble around it. We know what it is." But yeah, I can see that, and you think, "Oh, gee, it's gonna." Yeah. Or it was not. Yeah, we're not saying it's gonna all be underwater. So I think we'll be fairly close to be able to have this on our GIS, and I'm fairly certain you will be able to access it. But unless there's any further questions, we might say thank you very much for your time.
Us, thank you.
Daniel, can we just have 2 minutes?